This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not medical or legal advice. Always follow your local policies, procedures, and protocols when functioning in your respective profession. Additionally, the views expressed by the speakers and owners of this podcast are their own and do not represent the views of their respective employers. Listener discretion is advised.
Alert Medic 1 response.
Ken, Josh, and Mustafa here. Welcome back to the Alert Medic 1 podcast.
All right, so I kind of sprung this cold on Cody, so we're going to see what Cody's reaction is. All right, so shout out to Mike Carencio from the OK Medic podcast. This is one of his posts from, I guess it would have been July 15th. I'm going to read the post, and I mean, you guys can go look at it for yourself. And it's a picture of a clown, and it says, EMS is underappreciated, needs to have an increased scope and be treated as equals. But then he says also ... And this is a letter. I don't know if this is I don't know the actual verbiage. To be clear, I texted Mike, but he's working tonight, so he couldn't come on. He's got a bunch of shit to do, which is very fair. So let me just read this. It says, "Dear Program Administrator, I signed up to take your continuing education class, and I find that it is too hard. It covers content that is outside the scope of an EMS provider. I have been in EMS for 15 years and was recently elected ambulance captain at my fire company, and I can honestly say I don't know why we need to know all of this receptor and advanced farm stuff. You guys need to be realistic." And obviously, I think it's satirical. I think he's like making a hyperbolic post about some. I can't imagine someone actually emailing that ever. And then his post goes to saying, we're not going to talk about what program, and we can talk about why after we stop recording, but everyone can go look at it themselves. It says, my boss at the education company I work for on the side tells me that we get an email a week from an angry student because the course material is, quote, too advanced, end quote. I am all about education that is pertinent, applicable, and not built as a way for the instructor who builds the content to try and flex their intellectual prowess, which, you know, Cody, is one of my pet peeves. But if you never push yourself out, but if you never push out of your comfort zone, you're never going to be better. Put yourself. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. God, I can't read it tonight. Apparently, push yourself out of the comfort zone. Take courses that challenge you. Listen to lectures that are going to make you have to write things down and go back and look them up later. Read material that is going to require you to stop and think and look up terms and concepts as you read. Google something before asking the instructor a question. Read an article before asking questions about it. End of rant. And I got to say, man, I know that might be a little controversial because I know it's controversial about what topics are relevant to EMS. But I got to say, I fully support Mike on this, man. And I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I remember this now. Now that you read that, I get an email a week, part of it. And I'm still flabbergasted that we don't need this content because it's too hard. I can't get my head around that because I think when I reposted on that and I shared it on the ops page, I said something along the lines of the patient doesn't care how hard it is. They don't care how hard you had to study. They don't care how long it was. Only that you did it and that you're able to use it when you show up to their house. That's kind of that was kind of my gut reaction to seeing that and seeing, of course, I'm not shocked either that there's folks out there like, oh, this is too hard. Oh, why do we need to know this? Why do we need to know this? Why do we need to know that? And I think it's a good snapshot of the 10-80-10 principle. In any organization or in any profession, you have 10% that are the top, the tippity top, the cream of the crop. You really don't have to worry about them. They're going to take care of themselves. I think Eric Bauer said something similar to that on a podcast just not too long ago, that you don't have to worry about them. They're going to handle it. And then you got the 80% that's in the middle. They're good. They're there. They show up. They're dependable. And I would say that's half of that 80% leaning toward the 10%. And then there's the bottom of that 80% that's leaning toward the bottom. And then finally, you have the bottom 10 percenters, and the bottom 10 percenters are they're a nightmare. They're kind of like the dead weight that you have to drag around, and they're the ones that are concerned with how many calls they run a day, how hard it is. Wah, I didn't sign up to do this, and to which I would say, what did you sign up for?
Yeah.
Why are you here? What are you doing?
Yeah. I just, for me, I guess it's surprising because you don't realize that people like that are going to select themselves into a class that's that difficult too, right? Like, I mean, and I really don't want to say which class we're talking about just because of, I mean, it doesn't matter what program, right? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what it is. What matters is, to be very clear, like I'm not trying to downplay any one person. What I'm trying to do is bring folks like that within the fold and be like, okay, where do you feel that this is okay, right?
Yeah.
Where what are your thoughts on what we do versus what are my thoughts on what we do, and let's try to find a compromise here. Because, quite frankly, Cody, I love what you said. The patient doesn't give a shit, right?
They don't.
And I've always been, people have asked me, quite frankly, I mean, what's the point of a biology degree? What's the point of a physiology degree that I've got? And one of the things that I really truly think it helps me do is it helps me understand some concepts that otherwise are very difficult, not necessarily because I learned them in a classroom, but because I'm able to apply what I learned in the field. And additionally, it helps me be a better educator, um, and I get really concerned when I hear this mindset, because that mindset is a sign of something deeper, always a deeper systemic work culture problem, maybe a self-esteem problem, anything. And which is okay if it's a self-esteem thing, if it's anything, if it's a learning disability thing, maybe it's a reaction to a learning disability, anything, right? That's okay. But I want to be the educator, and I want to be the colleague that acknowledges that and tries to help someone through that, instead of just saying, oh, screw this. Like, there was a period of my life where, people have heard my story multiple times. I'm not going to repeat it, but I was certainly not the best college student. I was not doing well in like the higher mathematics, especially. And I was like, man, screw this. I don't need to know this. But really, that was just a defense mechanism because I was hurting because I didn't get the stuff. And I had what I didn't realize then, a really bad ADD, which once I got fixed, oh, guess what? I'm doing a lot better. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think I did a lot of verbal vomit there, but what are your thoughts?
Well, you give me. I have two points to make. The first point I want to make is I I agree with you that maybe there is a deeper systemic issue when an individual of from anywhere says something like that, and I believe that in any endeavor, in any business context, in any professional world, that humans, by their nature, respond to the environment that they're in. That's Simon Sinek stuff, right? So you can take an A player and put them in a bad environment and watch them devolve and watch them become the very people that they rail against, right? Or that they were trying to outperform to get the other job that they had when they were an A player. Or like conversely, you can take the D player and put them, granted within their capability and within realistically, place them on a high performing team surrounded by high performing individuals. Now they may never become that MVP A player, but their game will improve. They will improve. Their mindsets will be better. The way they do their job will be more efficient and more effective. They will respond to that environment. I mean, you can't just because you played on the Chicago Bulls doesn't mean you're Michael Jordan, right? But if you go from the losing team to the championship team, you will pick up things from the championship team. But if you go from the championship team to a losing team, you will assimilate to that environment. It's human nature to want to assimilate to those cultures.
Yeah, it's half and half. I absolutely agree with you. The other, what I can't help but think though, is the story that Jocko and them talk about in Extreme Ownership about the boat leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Boat teams where they had a team that wasn't performing well, and they had a team that was performing very well.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening is they swapped the leaders, and the
Mm-hmm.
leaders, and of course, if anyone is ever playing Alert Medic 1 bingo and they ever wanted to screw their friends over, uh, or it just wait for the word Jeopardy, and you're gonna get your points. The poor performing team got better because they had a better leader, and the well performing team, worsened. So I think it's a combination of things, but certainly I agree with you to a point. Going back to the education thing, what are your thoughts on that? What are some tips you can give to people that, I mean, obviously, you're on the national circuit now for lectures. You lecture with some of the best, including our, Dr. Ben Lawner,
The
uh, our,
doctor.
our medical director. What are some tips you give to folks? How do you approach challenging topics and things that you don't know that you don't know?
So here's how I studied for the critical care stuff that I did. Um, I listened to a lecture. I take a just notes. If it sounded interesting or sounded somewhat important, it got written down, and it got written down, and I let it cook for a day or so. And then I went back and I made one pagers, basically slides out of the notes for that class or for that particular topic. And it helped cement the things in my brain. I also went to a course that required clinical hours. It was like an 88 hour course. Or I'm sorry, no, 96 and 96. So I had 96 hours classroom, 96 hours of clinicals for critical care. And it's so any gaps that I have when I go back to teach something or trying to explain something, or I'm like, I can't connect these two ideas somehow. And I just start at one of those ideas and I back into the other one. And I do enough research to back in to one of those other ideas. So if I don't understand the way a non-depolarizing paralytic works, I'll start with where I can get to the closest to, and then back into the information from there, and then go back and take the notes and build the slides and do all the things that'll solidify those things in my mind. Um, and that's if I'm doing maybe a deeper clinical topic. I'll do the same thing. If I'm trying to think like a student. If I got to connect these dots somehow, and I got to think like the student. What is this? How does a student connect these dots? Not how does an educator connect the dots? How does a student connect these dots in their head? And hopefully they've got a good foundation or have enough of an awareness of what you're talking about, which kind of brings us full circle back to the original issue. And I would say that maybe that guy got cheated in his initial education and came out of what was supposed to be clinician level education and came out with technician level understanding. And that's not his fault. That goes back to your point of leadership, leadership in education, leadership in organizations. They're both kind of two sides of the same coin. And it's on his leadership to a degree. It's on his leadership. At some point, you have to accept responsibility for your own development. And so the second point I was going to make earlier is this one is when you come up against these kinds of issues and you hear these kinds of statements. So one, I hear, I'm not going to accept responsibility for my personal development. I'm going to blame somebody else, which speaks to a character issue. There's not a problem with me. It's this guy over here or this system or the education. I didn't get trained well enough. It's not me. So there's a character issue there. You should be the kind of, at the clinician level, you should be the kind of person that you have your own training plan. You have your own training calendar. You have your own training goals. If your training calendar is the organization's training calendar, don't be shocked when some of the content that you're going to be exposed to throughout your career is too hard. Now, on the other side of this are the folks that, they kind of live in their heads, and it kind of speaks to a little neurosis, right? I'm not good enough. I can't, I shouldn't, I won't. Those kinds of statements or those kinds of mindsets are a little bit more difficult to tease out because it speaks to self-confidence. And again, they live in their head. These are kind of the more neurotic neurosis kind of folks. And in there, I mean, and in our profession and in the world, there's people who are a blend of both. You may have a neurosis superimposed on top of a character issue, and those are pretty difficult.
I
What do
probably
you
got
think,
one of
though?
them.
I can tell you right now, any given day, I'm one or the other. So,
Yeah,
um,
I certainly appreciate those points, man. You actually fell into one of my trap cards with your first statement because, well, you were talking about, you know, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm blanking on the exact term that you said. But what I was thinking about was, so we talk about, we talk about leadership, we talk about education, but we talked about how, you mentioned that initial education is probably a clinician's initial education has probably failed them. I would argue that is probably 60-70% of paramedics coming out of paramedic school.
mhm.
I mean, because for me, adequate education is changing. I'm always learning what I would put in a paramedic program. Ken has given me the privilege of being able to teach, at where he works, and we've taught there together now for years. Cody, that's where I met you.
Yeah.
And constantly, as I'm lecturing, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be doing this differently. I'm going to do, I should do this differently. We have a mirrored class where mid lecture for the first lecture, I'm like, all right, for the next lecture, I'm going to do it this way. Right. And then what I'll do is I'll make sure the first class gets the benefit of that after the second lecture. I wonder if we as educators are doing the best to create an environment for our students where we are providing that kind of scrutiny, right? Like we're not only teaching the primary content, but teaching them to be critical of their evaluators and their instructors and be like, hey, this is how you can become critically thinking learners, right? People ask me, nobody asked me this question, but I've heard people say, oh, what's the value of a bachelor's degree in EMS, right? And I'm still not convinced, right, that we need to have a bachelor's degree entry for like an EMT or anything. I'm not gonna, because I also can understand the value of we need folks in the system to provide care for our citizens, right? But so but what I say, what has the benefit of higher education for me has been the ability to learn how to learn, right? Because I tell you what, man, I have struggled through learning. Like, I haven't been very open about this, but college was hard for me, man. Like organic chemistry, I loved it and I did well in it. Well, relatively
Like
well.
you wouldn't think
It's not like I
that,
got an A
like
in it or anything.
you wouldn't think that talking to you now, though. You know, you wouldn't think that.
Yeah,
I'm trying to find my notes because
but it
they're
was
sitting
hard,
right
man.
here.
No, you're fine. But like,
you shot me a video once, and you said, "Hey, man, check this
okay.
out." And it was a YouTube video. You remember this of how to teach complex clinical topics? Do you remember this? It's been probably 4 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was from Eric
And
Sildorf, correct?
Yep, that's the one. And I made some notes, and you queued this up for me. There's a gap between what we deliver and what they walk away with, right? Most people don't understand the material.
So real quick, Eric Sildorf is the guy. Yeah, Eric Sildorf is the guy, and I apologize to the listeners. There's a little bit of delay between Cody and I, just because of internet issues. We apologize for that. Yeah, Eric Sildorf was one of my physiology professors, and honestly, I could probably ask him. I wonder if he'd be interested in coming on the show because he wrote a textbook. That the guy taught from his textbook that hadn't been published yet. He is who I aspire to teach like. Quite frankly, he really, for someone like me that really does struggle with like these concepts and like learning these concepts, he's someone that taught me how to learn, but also taught me how to teach a little bit. And I really gotta give him credit. So yeah, and I'll give it back to you, Cody. But I just wanted to give him, those props.
But man, we got to get him on. That would be an incredible conversation.
Yeah.
But so he makes a couple of good points. Most people don't understand the material, so they just memorize it. So there's a difference. There's no critical thinking there. This is how I call these people trivia masters, and they can memorize the terms, they can memorize something out of the book, they can memorize the fact, but they don't understand how that fact relates to the what 300 or 400 other facts that were presented to them as well. So they latched onto this one idea, and without a framework, they just revert to memorization, right? Without a way to think about this, without a way to, and it goes back to a presentation style. They are approaching the class or the content with, what do I need to know to pass the test?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's kind of baked into our culture from high school, junior high. What do I need to know to pass? Because I don't want to get left back. I don't want to get kicked out. And
Especially
so
if you're like a pre-med student trying to get a good GPA. Yeah.
yeah. And so we focus, and one thing that I did early on, going back to speaking and teaching, and I think I'll give you a better answer this time around, is I used to focus so much on the content, right? I'd focus so much on the way it looked and what I was saying and the way I wanted it to sound and the way I wanted it to come across. And instead, and in this presentation, and I've also heard this through Scott Weingart and Ashley Big, and some other cats do the teaching course. And it's basically this kind of stuff. How do you teach complex clinical topics to folks in a manner where they walk away from the class with knowledge? They walk away with understanding.
Yeah.
Right. And for understanding, you need story and you need context. So the story builds the context that they need so that they understand the material, not just content. Right. That's why I hate the canned courses. They're just content with no context.
I would argue that I might even be okay with you not knowing all the content, as long as you understand the concepts, right? Like I have done my job if you understand why. I don't need you to know all the different gap junctions. I don't need you to know all the different anatomy of the, apart from the basic anatomy. Like I don't need you to know all the in-depth stuff. I don't need you to know that a gap junction is what the electricity would have to travel through. I don't need you to know that shit. What I need you to know
Just had a stroke.
is what I need you to know is when there's a particular electrical wave in the heart, there is a requisite mechanical activity that also occurs, right? And when that stuff doesn't, that's when we got problems, right? I can explain that to anyone. I can explain that to I think I can. That wasn't me trying to like tout myself as an instructor. It sounded like I was though. But
no, but you're highlighting like the first solution to the way that to fixing the way that EMS or EMTs and paramedics are taught is deconstruct and then reconstruct these complex topics.
Yes.
Right. Break it down. Hey, these are the foundational functional elements of this topic of airway management. Right. So we just did this with Mikey the other night.
Yep.
Right. We break it all the way down. So Mike's talk broke it all down and put all the pieces out on the table. And then my talk came behind him and said, okay, we're going to reconstruct all these facts with story and context so that you all walk away understanding concepts of airway management, not just the content that we gave you. Yep. Most textbooks and instructors focus on what and how. And really what we're trying to get to is why.
Yeah.
We want the student to walk away with why, but you're not going to give them that if you just focus on what and how. So another method that you can use for concept or complex clinical concepts is you address historical errors and misconceptions. And this is something, and I'm gonna pump up both these guys. I'm gonna pump up Mike on OK Medic, and I'm gonna pump up the Pragmed boys with this one. Is they go back in the literature, they go back in the textbooks, and they go, this is we've all heard leave a fed, leave them dead, right? So we'll go with that one. If you're giving a talk on shock, you may start your conversation with something kind of spicy of we should be doing push dose leave a fed, something like that. So for everybody to go, what? And you've got their attention because they're listening to either confirm what they already know or disconfirm what they were taught, right? So you can address these historical errors and misconceptions. Now, science changes years and years, year over year and year over year. And I think a lot of it's not inflammatory content. It's not drama content that a lot of our colleagues are putting out there. What it does is it challenges people who've been doing it for a long time, and they're having an emotional reaction because they're like, I have not been doing this wrong. I am not doing this wrong. And I'm going to come out and I'm going to flame you in the comments because I'm not doing this wrong. That's not a logical or a rational argument to make. You're not there. Again, you're listening to confirm what you already know. And so you're not there to learn anyway. The next solution for complex clinical topics, you can chunk it up, right? You link groups of information. So when you're talking about shock, it's not just low blood pressure, right? You've got a hemodynamic piece of it. You've got a cardiorespiratory piece of it. You've got a neurological piece of it. As I'm building this course for undifferentiated respiratory distress, you have to chunk it up. And what I'm learning with this one is we don't do part 1, part 2, part 3 often enough in EMS. We want to get everything done on Tuesday night so we can go to the lab Thursday night. And what really we've got to do is we have got to space this stuff out for people, because the brain, you can only hold a sponge can only hold so much water before it starts dripping all over the floor. Right? It can only soak up so much juice before it just makes a puddle, right? So we've got to learn to space stuff out and take our time. And that speaks to another bigger issue with EMS education, that it's got to be compressed. 1,200, 1,400 hours, however long it is now, to, a bachelor's degree, great, good idea. What you need is a comprehensive paramedic curriculum.
Yes.
That can be delivered over the span of time that a bachelor's degree would be delivered. And this is happening in other parts of the world. So don't turn us off just yet. This is happening in places like the UK and in Australia. Those are long paramedic programs. I'll skip that part. I have a note written here and I love this note. I'm so glad. There's a reason phone numbers have hyphens in them.
Yeah.
You can't remember 7, 9 numbers now, right? 6 or 10 numbers, right? Is it 10? 9, 10?
It's 6 and
9.
4. So yeah.
10. Yeah, there we go.
No, it's 10, right?
If I tried.
Yeah, 6 and 4. Yeah.
Yep. So if I gave you a phone number and I just gave you 10 numbers in a line, you're not going to remember that. And I asked you tomorrow, hey man, what's my phone number? You're going to go, because your brain doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. It does, what you have to do is you chunk it up. You put it into manageable chunks so that you can remember it. And of course, when the telephone system was created, nobody ever thought that we would never have to memorize a phone number, 2 centuries later, right? Is it 2 centuries?
Yeah.
Roughly?
Don't ask me.
Alexander Graham Bell? I don't know. Somebody fact check us on that one and
2
fix
centuries?
us in the comments. They would have never thought about that. So they knew that people. Go ahead.
I don't know. 1800s.
And then what you can do when you chunk things up like that, you can create a rhythm and a timbre to it that helps solidify it in your nugget, in your brain, and it sticks there. And you will say that number to yourself the way that you memorize it every single time, like a song. Right? It's incredible that how the mind works with that stuff. And then the last solution to creating good physiologic content and breaking it down is to guide the students' thinking with true application questions. Not what is the dosage for X? What is this rhythm? True application. You have this rhythm with this presentation, and you have this you have what's your next step, right? How are you thinking about this problem? And then you kind of figure out that's your quality assurance on your lecture or on your talk, is if I give you application questions and you're able to answer those to a degree, not at an expert level, but at least a novice or intermediate level. And I can go, all right, you guys understand the concept. You didn't memorize my content. So I can walk away with that and I go, okay, cool. That's the QA part. And then you reinforce them and bring them up to that, maybe that expert level understanding that you're trying to get them to during application and scenarios. But guiding thinking with true application questions is so important, because that's how you're tested now, right? You're tested with scenario-based questions, and we're a lot of the writing standards for questions on the board exams for FPC and CCP and TPC, WPC, whatever we got now. I missed one. Community paramedic too. They're all written for a larger percentage of application questions. And when I write questions for CE content that I do, a lot of the writing standards are no more true false, no more all of the following are correct except, which of the following is not, which this concept includes all of the following except. Those questions are going away, guys. They're going away. And one, I think it speaks to the fact that the profession is growing. It is pushing forward. It is, against some of their will, it is dragging them into this is too hard territory. Well, good. If it's too hard for you, you got two choices: catch up or go home. Because the patient cannot afford for you to show up and go, it's too hard for me to do this job. And you know what you are? Actually, you know what? You can stay. Don't leave. You can stay because you're still a transport benefit to the patient. You could at least get them to a hospital. You're not going to do anything for them on the way, except maybe start the life. What do they call it? The lock of life. You get a lock of life started for the hospital before they get there. And ultimately, I hate to use this statement, but until we're on that level of application of concept or application of understanding a concept, you are only a transport benefit to your patient. Unless you can bring a clinical brain, an academic clinical brain, to that patient's living room, you are a transport benefit to the patient.
Yeah.
All right, Moose, it's yours, man. I'm done talking, man.
No, man, that's awesome. I can't help but think, shout out to one of the medics. Well, I'm not going to name him because I don't know if he'd be cool with it, but I just worked a shift, at my part-time gig. And then one medic on the shift, brought to me, actually both of them. One is a newer medic and the other one's been a medic for a minute. And he brought to me an arrhythmia. And, he was talking about it. And I was like, hey, man, like, I see this, stuff like that. Like, and we initially had a disagreement on the arrhythmia. And then, like, it didn't really matter if we agreed or disagreed. The discourse I absolutely loved. And I probably should have said something to him, now that I think about it. Maybe next time I see him, I'll be like, hey, I really appreciated that discourse between me and the two other medics. Because we're not saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cody, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but we're not necessarily saying that you have to become an expert on all this physiology or whatever, right?
No,
we got members on the team that aren't experts on physiology. I'm not expert on physiology, right? I just happen to know a little bit, right? Or like operations or whatever. But it's the mindset of, hey, I'm gonna come to work, I'm gonna go in, and I'm gonna learn something new. And these guys were the paramount examples of that kind of medic. You know what I mean? Because like. He was and then the guy even had the humbleness. He was humbled and he said, listen, man, I got this wrong. I now agree with what you're saying. And like, I was so impressed with the guy, right? Because how often do you actually see that kind of emotional maturity for someone to be humbled enough to say, hey, I'm wrong? And, I can't say that I've always been like that. And I bet you, man, there's days I have that I still wouldn't be like that,
Yeah, man.
I was so impressed. And so I just want to, what Cody's saying, you're going to be a transport asset. That's for those people that have zero willingness to learn. Yeah. If you have an inkling of learn, man, that's what I think we would want to see. And I think that's what brings all of us forward together as a profession. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe Cody is the one that says like the harsher things, and I'm like the good cop that comes in and be like, "Wait, but it's okay, it's okay."
No, I think you're right, man. And I'll tell you what, Moose. The day that I'm wrong, man, I will make sure everybody knows about it. but
The
but this is a
yeah, go ahead.
good. This is a great illustration of constructive discourse. This is a great illustration of balancing ideas, balancing approaches, so that you can reach everybody.
Yeah,
Right? I mean, tone matters. The
yeah,
way you present something matters. You can it goes back to like giving performance feedback to a student or to a colleague or to a subordinate. um, you can deliver. There's a couple of bullet points to it, but you're not wrong just because you're being an asshole about it. But the individual is going to walk away with more of the emotional reaction to what you're saying versus if you present it that way, right? If you present it just a little bit too aggressive, which anybody that knows me that's listening right now is going to go, "Yep, that's Cody. That's his middle name. That's what the D stands for. It's aggressive." You know, I think I think tone matters, man. I think it's good that you bring that up of good cop, bad cop. I think we teach in isolation as instructors way too much. We should
Mhm.
teach in pairs. We should teach in teams, so that you can balance that out. Because one thing I do like that when we do teach together is I don't necessarily see that happening, and I don't know that that's happening when I'm up front and I'm doing
Mhm.
stuff on the board, and I can't tell that my tone's changing aggressive, but you'll interject and you'll provide. I'm not going to say the kinder, gentler side, but you'll change the tone
Yeah,
enough where I can go, "Oh shit, yeah, I was probably coming a little bit hard at it, or a little bit hard with that." Or and those things work in concert with each other, right? It works vice versa as well.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Because there's certainly times where I may miss the mark, and you have to have somebody come in and be like, "No, this is black and white." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
No, I certainly appreciate that. It's interesting because that's how we first met too, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
teaching there. So, what was I going to say? I wanted to just finish up with, you gave some tips on how you learn. I just want to give some folks, and maybe we can title this like educational tips, or I don't know, we can come up with a fancy title, but um, this comes off the heels of me doing a 12 lead lecture for one of the programs I teach at, which I ended up whiteboarding. I just whiteboarded the whole thing and got good feedback from that, from both an instructor and the students. And I've been asked to do another 12 week class for a different program, so I'm just like looking at what I learned, and you know, and through that, I wanted to make sure that I reviewed all the concepts, and I wanted to punch it up a bit and learn. And from that, I was forced to review the material. And some of the tips that I've had, you talked about how you like go through a lecture and you'll like write down notes. I actually do the opposite, and I'll actually tell my students to do this too. I said, listen, don't stop writing and just listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that too, especially if it's recorded. I'll I do this with Matu, his like ECG Weekly. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm referencing ecgweekly.com. Dr. Amal Matu, he's a world-renowned emergency electrocardio. Oh my god! Now I'm having a
Because
stroke.
yeah, I can't help you,
Electro
man. I don't know what you're trying to say.
cardio electrocardiography. Yeah, electrocardiogram. So electrocardiography. So emergency electrocardiography. Expert, right? World-renowned expert, does a lot of like emergency medicine stuff. He has a weekly podcast thing that he does. It's like 20 minutes and it's really good. I recommend everyone to go subscribe. It's like $26 a year. But every time I listen to his videos, first time I just listen, right? Because I don't want to miss something. I don't want to miss because it's not just what he's saying. It's like the cue of his words, right? The different tenses and stuff. I don't want to miss any of that. Then I'll go back and listen. And that time I'm going to take some notes. And then what I'll do is, I remember this wasn't recently, but he was talking about arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia, right? And I was like, what in the hell is that? And apparently that's something that they got to know. And I'm like, me personally, if an emergency physician has to know about it, I need to know about it, right? Like if one of his residents need to know something for their like annual like EKG competition, then I need to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I certainly don't know the majority of stuff, but I try, right? And then I'll go exactly what you said. I'll Google stuff, but I won't just Google it. What I'll do is I type in, for example, um, LVH stat pearls. That will bring up something that I know is valid, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
100% correct all the time, but it'll be under PubMed, so it's whatever. And this is how I would do it if the listeners wanted to recreate it. Any clinical concept, right? So whether it's VFib or LVH or whatever, a STEMI, and then type in stat pearls. That's going to give you a good foundational reading thing that you can write down. And a lot of times they have like test questions and stuff like that, and it can help you logic through some of the concepts. Then I go look for content that is not made for paramedics, right? And I know that's kind of shooting us in the foot, but what do I mean by that? I don't mean stuff like us, right? I mean the pun intended, I guess I should say. If it comes from a paramedic textbook, I'm not looking at it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry. I'm the first one to say that, and I will stand by that. I don't look at Nancy Caroline, God rest her soul. She was a badass, according to John Moon. Go listen to that episode if you guys want. But and American Science, right? Go read the book. She was a badass. The book, not so much of a badass, especially lately, right? And so I go look for stuff that's made primarily for medical students and resident physicians, and I try to find content there. And then what I do is I try to create flashcards. The app that I use the most is Quizlet. It's like, again, it's 20 some bucks a year for the premium one. I actually owe a cohort of my students some flashcards that I need to finish up for them. But that's how I learn the best. And my flashcards aren't necessarily, some of them are like, if I'm teaching, what leads are inferior, right? They kind of have to know that's foundational knowledge. But if I'm trying to learn a concept, I try to write an application problem on one side of the flashcard, kind of like what you described, and then on the end, I'll write write the complete answer. This is how I was able to get through renal physiology from Dr. Sildorf, because like he's like a kidney guy, like he's really good at all physiology. But if you were to ask me, if you were to ask him, I think that his shit is like renal physiology. That's like how we love EMS. My man loves the kidney, and um, the kidney is one of the most complex organs I've ever had to like learn how it works, and
Mm-hmm.
that tip really helped me out with that. It really helped me out in biochemistry too. When I was taking biochem, it really was very helpful in learning those concepts. And the other thing I would encourage students and colleagues that are listening is try to write stuff out. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, don't write in words, write in process maps. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to figure out, for example, how a drug works, try to draw out like a concept map that demonstrates the negative or positive feedback loop you're trying to demonstrate, right? Whether it's pharmacological, whether it's endogenous, whatever, right? A basic process map really helps me kind of learn a topic a different way. And that's what I try to draw out for the students when we were talking about various heart physiology things that we were talking about. So I've been talking at length, but I just wanted to provide some of the stuff that helps me learn, but also helps me teach. Good, Cody.
I think it's important that we we dig a little bit deeper into what you're saying, that you don't go to the EMS textbooks and you don't go to the stuff that's written by paramedics for paramedics and stuff like that. And before anybody kind of gets their panties in a wad about it, physicians have from the inception of paramedics and EMTs have always been our educators. They always have been. It has always been a physician that it was oh, the American Sirens doc,
Nancy Caroline?
Saffer.
Oh, Peter Saffer. Yeah.
Yeah, Saffer. It was Peter Saffer that took paramedics under his wing and he taught them what they needed to know. And he approached that with a similar mindset that you had. If I have to know this as an emergency physician, you need to know this as my extension in the living room.
To be clear, he was an
And
anesthesiologist, and he would have probably shot you if you called him an
anesthesia.
EM. Yeah, because EM didn't really exist back then, right? I don't know, but
That's right.
yeah,
No, you're right.
yeah.
So we'll clean that up in the
Just
post edit, right?
no, we're not. I'm not editing that. I'm not editing shit. We're just gonna hit export on this. But
Full
yeah,
send.
it's fine. Keep going.
And when you go back to the West Coast, if you guys watched Emergency, the first episode of Emergency, yeah, Dr. Brackett took Johnny and Roy into a classroom and taught them everything they needed to know, or everything that he felt that they would need to know to get somebody through the first 20, 30 minutes or so of a true emergency. And of course, Johnny and Roy and what house, the Pittsburgh guys, John
Freedom
Moon's
House?
ambulance company, Freedom House. And like
Yeah,
what LA County and Freedom House, what they weren't dealing with was 911 abuse at that time. They had onesie twosies here and there, and they didn't have the system being taxed to the gills like we're dealing with. And so we're stay away from those topics. But it's important that we remember that we are inherently a physician's extension in a living room or on a roadside or at the bedside in an aircraft in an ambulance. You're an extension of your medical director, personified. You're their license personified next to a patient. And if a medical director says you need to know XYZ,
right, let's go.
Or not,
let's go.
Wow, man, you interrupted me. I forgot. I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
That's conceptually what we are as paramedics. If you break the word down, para and medicine next to the patient. If you break that word down that way, I had a train of thought and I went off the rails there. So let's disagree here. What you got, Moose?
All right, so I was with you in the beginning too. I was like, all right, man, I'm gonna give him like the he's gonna give the one punch, I'm gonna give the two punch, man. But the combo broke down. Okay, so I'm with you on the first part of like physicians as educators.
Mm-hmm.
Where I began to disagree with you is when physicians say, oh, you only need to know XYZ. No, I will be the steward of learning what I want to learn. Right? Like,
yes.
No. A red flag with any EMS medical director is, hey, you only need to know XYZ. No.
Mm-hmm.
Teach me the basics, and then I will decide what the ceiling of what I want to learn. You will not be the person to tell me that. And then the second piece is, at least where we work, we are by definition not the extension of any license. We are independently licensed clinicians, right? So, I don't see myself as an extension of anyone's license. It's my own license that I'm working under, and because with that license, I have a responsibility, right? And I have a duty to perform well under my own license, and maybe it's semantics. I don't know. Maybe you were talking more of like a philosophical license you were talking about. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, because like I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we don't disagree at all, because on the front end of this, yes, a physician can dictate scope of practice, but they should never dictate scope of knowledge. That's on you. The scope of practice is on the physician. The scope of knowledge is on you.
And technically, scope of practice isn't on a physician either, because it's a collective group of multidisciplinary people. But I'll let you finish your point.
You got to move to Texas, man, and go to a delegated practice state. You got to go to the Wild West at some point. I guess that's where that comes from, because I cut my teeth as a young medic in a delegated practice state where I don't want to say this, but I'm going to. It may even say it in the administrative code that a paramedic is an extension of the physician.
In Texas?
And yeah. And that's essentially what delegated practice is. You're that medical director's medicine in a living room and at the bedside and on the roadside. And this is especially in a state like Texas, where it can vary by zip code or county, the scope of practice and the level of care that you get. It's a little bit schizophrenic in Texas, but that they say that they like, this is my medicine. I'll never forget the Maggie McGraw when she said that this is my medicine. These protocols are, this is my medicine. And I don't practice medicine that way, and you won't practice medicine that way, as she admonished one of the medics for kind of being a little bit sloppy. That this is how you will do it, and we were very liberal protocols. They were very progressive, and the preamble statement was, "Listen, this is a list of treatments, and I'd like for you to stick to it as close as possible, but." I expect you to deviate when you need to, and that's kind of the way that she approached things. Which is, it's a little bit night and day. When I moved up here, I had a ton of problems with the protocol test when I came up here, because I'm not used to thinking that way as an independent, licensed provider, still working under the medical direction of a physician. And I guess it gets a little bit muddy. I guess to your point, yeah, that was more of a philosophical statement. If you have a medical director, in Maryland we have state level protocols and some optional jurisdictional things, because certain medical directors want their medics to be able to do certain things, or don't want them, right? Yeah. Optional jurisdictional protocols. It's it's new territory. It's still new territory for me. Operating with that mindset, I always look at myself of like, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I cut you off again. This delay's killing me. I apologize.
Sorry.
I'm just going to answer this call real quick while you're talking. One sec.
Yeah, and I always think of myself as, no matter what, I think of myself as a kind of an extension of my medical director's philosophies and mindsets, and how I kind of ask myself, is this, one, can I defend this decision to my medical director? And number two, is this a decision that my medical director would have made? And is it something that they can, and it's easier for them to support a decision and to have your back if you're thinking that way, instead of, can I get away with this? Oh man, we're cool. We're on the cool. They're going to have my back on this. That's the wrong mindset to have. And I guess I developed that working under Ben for a few years, working under Dr. Launer for a few years, and really having the support, having the training. And he doesn't pull any punches either when he gives you the outcome of a decision that maybe not a decision they made, but in the patient's clinical course, he unpacks everything. And maybe this intervention wasn't the best idea in this context. Maybe you were chasing numbers, blah, blah, blah. And he's really great about that. I wish all the medical directors were that way. Our medical director here where I work, she's great. She's fantastic. And what were you gonna say, Moose?
Oh yeah,
you got
she's
that look.
Cool. Yeah, no. I was just gonna say she's great, and I vehemently agree with everything you're saying, man. A good medical director is going to make or break your EMS educational program, EMS operational program, any and all of those things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I got to finish up. Dude, this has been great. If you think of a good title, let me know. I'll let you finish this out, and then I gotta FaceTime my niece back, so that's why we're ending this, because she called me. It's when a 3-year-old calls you, you call her back.
Pick it up, man. Pick it up. So to close this thing out, hey guys, make sure you like and follow on the Grams, on the Facebook, or wherever you do your social media stuff at. Check us out on YouTube. We got a YouTube channel. Like and subscribe, and wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, be safe, and we'll talk to you guys later.